now it's time to Pop Off with Mary Jane Popp.
And welcome to the Poppoff Radio Show. I hope everything is going well for you. We got a good show for you tonight. An inspirational story that will absolutely blow your mind. Seriously. We talk about people being able to survive. You know, how do you survive loss of family? And to a terrible way to lose them, suicide. But you know what? I'm a firm believer that the inner fortitude of a person can make it through almost anything. And I've got a guest for you that will prove that fact. And I think you're going to find her absolutely fascinating.
Sometimes in our life, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but
If you can imagine the pain and sorrow that suicide numbers will give people always, you know, we've gone so far up. I mean, way up with suicides, believe it or not. And it seems that no matter what walk of life, no matter what age, race, income, suicide is a growing concern. Now, every parent fears this nightmare. And Denny Meek has lived the nightmare not once, not twice, but 3 times, and tells the story in her book called Still Standing, a mother's raw journey from the shadows of loss to the dawning of hope. From Australia, Denny joins us and wants to share her story, and I want to hear it. Denny, nice to have you with us.
Hi, Mary Jane. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Now, let's talk about this. Now, you had 3 losses. 2 infant, was it 1 infant and 2 teens? Is that it?
Yes,
Okay.
That's right.
What was the situation? How did you lose your baby?
My second son was born with a congenital heart abnormality, which wasn't picked up very quickly. It was picked up when he was 8 days old, and when he was 11 days old, he had open heart surgery, which was successful. And we brought him home when he was a month old, and complications began to develop quickly when he was about 2 months old. It was not expected for us to lose him, but we lost him in the middle of one night very suddenly back at the hospital.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Now, you had the loss of 2 teens to suicide. How old were they?
My eldest son died first. He was 18. And my daughter died next. She was 19.
Do you have... I don't know how to even ask this. Do you know why? I mean, do they leave a note? Do they give you some clue as to why they would want to commit suicide? They were just beginning their lives.
Yes. Both my children left notes, and I was very grateful for that. I attended a brief parent support group and met with 4 other mothers who'd lost children to suicide. And I was the only one who'd been left with notes, so I was very grateful. I knew what that meant, but it still didn't explain things. And I think that some of the whys they take with them, if they even understand them all themselves. And there are whys that are not explained psychologically. There are spiritual whys. Why did this happen? Why is this allowed to happen? How can this happen?
Did you have any clues at all?
It's complex. Suicide is complex. There are no simple explanations. It doesn't come down to, for example, a low self-esteem or feeling bad that day. The triggers usually come on top of a background, a personality, a temperament, you know, things that are happening in that period of time coming up to. There's usually a lot of layers. So, do I know? Look, not really. I didn't really expect it. I was worried. I think a lot of parents worry about their children, but I really didn't expect it.
Oh, of course not. I don't think any parent does.
I don't think so.
And then you had, on top of everything else, domestic violence? Really?
Yes. Really, the domestic violence preceded the death. So,
do you think maybe some of that had to do with at least the two teens. The infant wouldn't know, but the two teens?
Look, I do, Mary Jane. I didn't know until I started researching it for myself when I came across a very shocking statistic that children who live with domestic violence are 6 times more likely to end their own lives.
Really?
It was a terrible shock to me. And once again, I felt I'd failed my children by not getting them out in time, out of that toxic situation. It didn't affect just me, it affected them, and children don't have to witness it firsthand to be affected by it.
I think sometimes children, when they get to at least be able to understand a little bit of life, they feel it's their fault. They feel guilt. And maybe some of that had to do with it. And they're not. I mean, they're not to blame at all. But they don't understand that.
No, that's right. That's right. I learned later from my daughter's journals after she died that she had felt guilty for not being able to stop me from being hit.
Oh.
She witnessed the final hit that actually broke my wisdom tooth. And I didn't know that it had impacted her, so I didn't even know that she'd seen it.
Now, did he abuse your children?
Did my partner abuse my children?
Yes.
No, not directly. The warmth would leave the relationship with them when things were tense with me, but no, the children were not directly abused.
Now, you say your daughter had anorexia?
Yes, she did. Yes, she developed fully blown anorexia when she was admitted to hospital when she was 13.
Wow. And she passed away?
Not from anorexia.
From what?
From suicide.
Oh, from suicide. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we went through. I actually saw her anorexia developing when I picked it up when she was about 9.
Oh, my.
I was getting very unsettled by just little things that were happening, little behaviours and little concerns that she would express. And she was a perfectionist. She was incredibly bright and very talented. She was attending a school for gifted and talented children, and I understand that 87% of gifted and talented children are perfectionists.
Yes.
So that contributed. There were lots of contributing factors. Anorexia nervosa is one of the most complex mental illnesses. So she continued these behaviours that concerned me. I have a background in psychology and I was keeping an eye out for it. And I couldn't get anybody to listen to me and I couldn't get her treated before anything had manifested. So it was very frustrating for me. And finally, when it started to manifest physically, I was able to get her seen. With her agreement, I had to finally wait for a moment to say, "You need help, Allie, you need help." And she said, if I could get any. I said, "Do you want me to see if I can find someone?" She said, "Yes." That was the turning point. So she did not have very good help before her hospitalisation. The doctor and the psychologist said, "You don't have an eating disorder. Oh, don't have anorexia. You have an eating disorder, but it's not anorexia."
What's the difference?
So, anorexia is very complex. It's notoriously difficult to treat. Bulimia nervosa, for example, is not quite as complex and it responds more readily to treatment.
I've spoken to people who have had anorexia, and it is amazing. I mean, they look in the mirror and they see a completely different person.
Yes.
You know, we see a person that looks like they walked out of Auschwitz. You know, they're just emaciated, and they look and they say, "I'm fat," and it's like, how can you say this? But it's amazing.
It is amazing. And how do the issues such as a feeling of a lack of control manifest as I want to diet and exercise? How do we get from one to the other? It's very complex. But
what I'm curious about is how did you handle all this? Those were the only children you had, right? Those the baby and then the 2 teens, right?
I had 4 children.
Oh, you had 4 children. Okay.
Yeah. So I have one left.
One, oh my gosh. A boy or girl?
Yeah. Boy.
Boy. And how old is he now?
He's 30.
30. Does he look back and say, did he understand what was going on? Or was he too young?
It's a very hard thing for us to live with. It's a bit of an awkward thing for him to talk about, emotional subjects. But he's a sensitive soul and beautiful, gentle person. And we sort of feel it anyway. And we get on with our lives with that understanding that that's what we're doing.
So how did you handle, the grief, the pain that you must have felt?
Yeah. Do you mean the losses or the anorexia or...
All of the above. It was piled so high and deep on you. It wasn't like one thing. It was bad enough to lose the infant. It was bad enough then your teens, and the anorexia. It just got all piled. The good Lord thought you could really handle a lot.
Yeah. There were times when my nervous system just was not getting a break, and I thought, how can this not manifest in an illness of some kind? It'll be cancer or something at some stage. It was my thyroid that blew, but that's readily treatable with one tablet a day.
Now, how old are you now?
I'm 62.
62, okay. And you have your 30-year-old son yet. So how do the two of you get together and try and figure out how to handle all this, or did you over the years?
My son lives with me still, and he didn't get his driver's license until last year.
Oh, bless his heart.
So he's incredibly intelligent. He could have done anything. He had a few years at school of coming ducks without studying, but he chose an apprenticeship in baking, and he's just finished that and just got his driver's license.
Good for
that means
him.
A lot of freedom. Yeah, he's doing very well.
What kind of message do you want to tell parents or let parents know how to deal with this kind of grief? It's bad enough for one time, and then you've had it 2, 3 times, and then your third son, I should say your fourth child, still having some problems. How did you handle all this? You had to go through grief and then also making sure that there was a safety net for your last son. I don't even know where to begin. How did you do it? Did you get some help?
Yes, I've had constant help. I've made sure that I've been in touch with counsellors or psychologists, psychiatrists. My daughter's psychiatrist is a great support to me. My parents have been a great support to me.
Good.
They've been a constant in our lives and in my children's lives. They've held a lot of space for me. I've journaled a lot.
Good.
I've journaled over 3 million words in my life. And that's been a daily habit that sort of scraped the top off the pain. I would just spill it out onto the page, whatever I was feeling. And that was a great help.
Wow.
But I would say when it gets really bad, you come down to a day at a time. And then
sometimes one step at a time, Denny. One step at a time.
Sometimes an hour at a time.
Wow.
And just try very hard to remember that it's big what you're going through if that doesn't further traumatize you, and give yourself a break if you can. It's very hard. I wouldn't actually advise bereaved parents because we get enough advice from people who haven't been through what we have.
Yeah.
But I would just ask them to take care of themselves if they can, especially physically. Go for a walk if you don't feel like getting on the gym equipment, and maybe in nature because that's very comforting and supportive. And try to keep a sleep routine, try to eat well, and when you can't do those things, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow.
But how do you not sometimes just sit down and say, why me? Why did I have to lose my baby and my 2 teens to suicide, my daughter with anorexia? You must sometimes say, good Lord, why did you do this to me?
I certainly have. And that why me question burns. It's a difficult psychic pain, that one, especially for developed countries. It's hard when others around you are not going through what you are.
Yeah.
If your circumstances vary greatly with your cultures. I felt at times like a pawn swept around the chessboard. I felt expendable.
Yeah.
I felt expendable to God. I thought, if you need to take children or people, don't keep coming back to my nest. And it felt like the rules were different for me than for other people, like I was on another planet.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and I went through a really severe dark night of the soul, a spiritual crisis, and my faith did change. It really has to. When you're down that deep, you can't remain unchanged.
I have to ask you this, because, I don't know that you would, because you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, it was domestic violence. It was all these negative things around you. And I can understand the grief. Did you ever go through a guilt phase?
Yes. I think guilt is part and parcel of the challenges of a death by suicide. I think there's a lot of anger too, or there can be. I think guilt is also natural when you've lost a child.
Sure.
I attended a bereaved parent support group for 8 years. That was a lifeline for me.
Amazing.
And I saw a lot of parents come and go, and what was common for us. And I think when you have a baby, you don't have to be told the aim of the game is to keep this child alive now.
Yeah.
And when they die, there's a sense of failure, however they died. It's a natural part of grieving the death of a child. But with a suicide, it's compounded.
But you lived, you had the courage to live in the face of death 3 times. 3 times. That's, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Right.
It's bad enough 1 time, but then 2, and that's. I admire you for hanging in there. But what advice do you give then of other parents that may be facing not near of what you are, but having to face the suicide of a child? Because to me, that is the epitome. An adult, at least they made a choice. They lived their life, they made a choice, that was it. But a teenager, 18, 19 years old, these 2 kids of yours, they were just beginning their life.
I think suicide bereavement is one of the most difficult losses to bear, and it deserves its space with care. I think that I would always recommend one-on-one counselling for all the family, because your risk of dying in the same way is increased after you've lost somebody so close.
Sure.
And talking helps, but that can be thwarted by the stigma. So getting a good bereavement support group is really important. There are good post-vention suicide support groups and organisations. Having their number on hand and that of a bereavement by suicide support group can be really comforting. Also, reaching out online can be good to see that you're not alone, because that isolation is, I think, one of the worst parts of the loss.
Oh, sure. It's amazing. We have, in both Australia, where you live, and in the United States, we think, well, we have, wonderful networks and people who know about mental illness and problems like that. And yet we're still losing. I mean, teen suicide is the #1 suicide right now in our country.
Wow.
That's frightening. They're just beginning their lives. Of course, we've gone through the pandemic, which was not helping anything, obviously, and loneliness and social separation. I mean, we have to go through so many things, and how do we prepare our kids to make it through these times?
Yes. In my grief, I felt like I'd failed to do that.
No,
it's hard not.
You can't. There's just so much blame you can take. I have to be honest with you, Denny. You can beat yourself up so much, but then sometimes circumstances take over. And you can't blame yourself for those circumstances. You have to deal with them. You've dealt with them the best that you knew how.
Yeah.
It's not always enough, but that's not your blame. Life is not enough. It really isn't.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's part of the tasks of grieving, to separate those out, what is mine and what isn't.
Absolutely.
And allowing a little bit of logic in when you can, when you're ready for it.
And you said you did a lot of journaling. Was that a big help?
Huge. That was my number one coping mechanism. It still is. I don't know how I would get by in life at all without it. I can just spill it all at the page, and it does. It's a huge help to me.
Fantastic.
I feel much better after I've journaled.
So what do you want people to take away from your book, Still Standing, A Mother's Raw Journey from the Shadows of Loss to the Dawning of Hope, which you still have now, right?
Yes. Yeah. I would want them to know that they were not alone. I wrote this book for other bereaved parents mostly. I know that readers have got a lot out of it who've never experienced any of these experiences. But I wanted to reach out to bereaved parents so that they would know they were not alone in their suffering, that the excerpts that I've described in the book, Still Standing, are aimed at them so that they could identify and they could see this person knows. They know the stretch that I'm going through. They've been there. And if she can make it, maybe I can too.
Well, blessings to you to try and help others, because I think that's what you're trying to do. Do you have a website by any chance?
I do. DennyMeek.com is my website.
And that's, let me spell it for him. That's DennyMeek, okay?
That's it.
.com?
.com, yes.
Fabulous.
That's it.
And where is Still Standing available?
All good bookstores, about 51,000 of them, including Amazon, all the good bookstores, and on the page, on my website as well.
Well, Denny,
Get a signed copy.
Thank you so much for talking to us all the way from Australia. And you know what? It's a very small world. We all have to face so many challenges, and the challenges may have different locations, but the feelings are the same.
We're humans together.
You betcha. You bet. So, Denny, thank you so much for sharing your story. Blessings to you and to your son. Hang on to him real close tonight, okay?
I will.
Blessing.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
Bless you. Take care now.
You too. Thank you so much.
Once again, that's Denny Meek, M-E-E-K. The name of the book, Still Standing. I don't know how she does it, but she does. It's amazing.